So this is one of the portions in which we have to deal with is Language of Paradox by Klempt Brook. When we move on to the introduction about the author, we can see that Klempt Brooks, he is well known as an American teacher and a critic, and his period of life is there given 1906 to 1994. He was born in US on October 16, and he was well known, as I told you, he was well known as an American teacher and a critic. And more than that, apart from his works, we can see so much of works are given there: modern poetry and the tradition, the Velvet Own, and many other works like understanding poetry, understanding fiction, understanding drama, and all. And all these works, of course, we are giving emphasis on those. And apart from that, he is more known, or his main area of study is about the new criticism. And when it comes to new criticism, he gives more emphasis on close reading and the structural analysis of literature. So this is what we have to keep in mind, that he is an American teacher and a critic, and he established a new criticism, and in new criticism he gives more emphasis on close reading and the structural analysis of literature. Of course, there is no need for explanations on new criticism and close reading, because in the previous syllabus, in your UG syllabus, you have done with all those topics like new criticism and close reading. Anyway, I'll give you just a gift on that new criticism was a formalist movement in literary theory that was given more dominance in the American literary criticism in the middle of the 20th century, and it gives more emphasis on close reading, particularly on poetry, to discover how a work of literature functioned as a self-contained, self-referential aesthetic object. So this is what is about new criticism. It's there given. New criticism, incorporating formalism, examines the relationship between the text's ideas and its form, between what a text says and what it says it. And when it comes to close reading, of course, these are actually used as synonyms in some way or the other. When it comes to close reading is a thoughtful, disciplined reading of a text. Okay, and it is also called as close analysis. When with the terms itself it is understood, that means a close examination on a text, apart from all those other the biographical or the sociological matters, all historicism way of analysis is rejected here, and here it's given only the importance, or the importance is given only for the work itself. That means only to the text. Before moving on to the topic, we must know what is paradox. Paradox is nothing but it seems totally contradictory, and literary paradox, when it comes to literary paradox, it seems completely true at some times. And here we have some points of paradox in literature, like a literary device consisting of the anonymous juxtaposition, and it is a method of literary composition, and it is a method of literary critical appreciation. And paradoxes in literature are often less about logical conundrums and more about illuminating meaning. And as I told you, it seems totally contradictory, and literary paradoxes are often totally true at the same time. And we can see that Klempt Brooks is an active member of New Critical Movement, and he uses this method, he uses the method of paradox for reading or understanding the poem, and with this he makes the critical interpretations. So it's that paradox when Jones Dunn writes to Holly Sonnet 10, and in that Holly Sonnet we can see a line, "Death, thou shalt die." And with that we can understand what is paradox in a little more. That means here the line is, death thou shalt die. That is somewhat contradictory because it's an expression of hope for the unknown future. Okay, the idea is that once people wake up in heaven, according to the religious belief, once people wake up in heaven, death will be dead. According to our belief, death is the end of everything. And here, when John Donne brings paradox in his sonnet, we can see that some sort of ambiguity and contradictions or even confusions are there. That is nothing but death is not the end, but something else is going to happen. So, paradox in poetry. Cleanthrope argues that poetry is made up of a language of paradox, meaning that poetry is made up of a dynamic balance of opposing ideas, attitudes, and feelings. He also lays out his argument for the centrality of paradox by demonstrating that paradox is the language appropriate and inevitable to the poetry. And this argument is based on the contention that referential language is too vague for the specific message a poet expresses. So he must make up his language as he goes. And of course, Brooks argues that words are mutable and meaning shifts when words are placed in relation to one another. And next, the examples, which is given by Cleanthrope in his essay, The Paradox, the Language of Paradox, we can see he is using the works from Wordsworth to Shakespeare to show the ideas that can be expressed through paradox. And he is giving Coleridge's description of imagination to give more expressive idea on this use of paradox. When we move on to the first example, that is Wordsworth, he himself actually admits that the purpose was to choose incidents and situations from common life, but to handle them in such a way that ordinary things should be presented in the mind in an unusual aspect. So that was actually, we can see that is purposefully done by William Wordsworth. And in his very famous poem, it is Beauteous Evening. In that particular poem, the evening is compared to none. And Brooks particularly explains that there is contradictions between the words, like the three lines are given there. It is a beauteous evening, calm and free. The holy time is quiet as a nun, breathless with adoration. So here we can see the contradiction between the words like breathless and calm and quiet. He argues the word breathless suggests actually excitement, but Wordsworth has described the evening as both quiet and calm. And so he further argues that these contradictions in words arise because the language is too vague for poets to be able to express their intended messages without creating paradoxes. Actually, the paradox is discovered in the end of the poem. That is, the girl is more full of worship than the speaker precisely because she is always consumed with sympathy for nature and not as is the speaker. Another example is also another poem of Wordsworth, that is Composed upon Westminster Bridge. Here Brooks says that the poem offers paradox not in its details but in the situation which the speaker creates. That means here we can see, though London is a man-made marvel in many respects, in opposition to nature, the speaker does not view London as a mechanical and artificial landscape, but as a landscape comprised entirely of nature. And the speaker has an explanation for that. Like London was created by man, but man is a part of nature. So he is connecting that. He's saying London is thus too a part of nature. And so he's giving the beauty of London as a natural phenomenon. So this is the paradox we can see in the poem composed upon Westminster Bridge. He's also explaining that if a paradox was the basis of Romanticism, it was amply used by the neoclassics in their poetry. He's explaining that much more, like the Romantics used it to arouse wonder and to awaken the mind to the new beauties which were ignored as commonplace and trivial. But the new classical poets or the neoclassics, they used it in an ironical way. He's also giving much more examples in the essay, like the poets Pope, Blake, Coleridge, Gray, and Donne. We can see much more examples, even Shakespeare too. Actually, he ends his reading or ends his essay with a reading of John Donne's poem, The Canonization. I hope everybody know the poem, The Canonization, which he uses a paradox as its underlying metaphor. The canonization in the language of paradox is that where paradox becomes central to expressing complicated ideas of sacred and secular love, provides an example of this kind of development. So here we can see what is there in this essay, just a gist of what we have seen. That is how language of poetry is different from the language of science. And it is a language which is the connotation, in which the connotations play as great as a part of the denotation. And the poet constructs his language as he goes and defines his own rules. And the poet is, of course, has the control over language. And he is also explaining that the individual poet is given a great deal of power in the process of knowledge making. And he is also saying that, Clarence Brooks is also saying that the reader is isolated from the production of meaning. Once more, I'll move through the main points. The centrality of paradox as a way of understanding and interpreting poetry. It formulates formalist criticism, emphasized the interior life of a poem, codified the principles of close reading, language appropriate and inevitable to the poetry, and the poet must make up his language as he goes. These are some points in which you have to keep in mind. Thank you, and hope you have understood. If there is any clarifications or any doubts, you can message me personally or you can call me personally. Thank you so much.